We're live. It is 7:31, so I'm a little bit late, but that's okay. better late than never, right? Tonight I want to talk about 462 valve stuff, and I have a thumbnail up of the old Ford Racing 462 valve blower kit that they used to offer. It's pretty cool. If you take a look at it, it's kind of unique in that it has integrated semi-long runners. I'd call them medium length runners, because if you look at the factory PI intake manifold for a 462 valve, those are very long runners. If you look at most of the blower kits for these things, particularly for positive displacement blowers, Kenny Bell, that kind of thing, you look at those are usually, the blower mounted on some sort of custom lower manifold. And because of packaging, particularly if they want to put an intercooler in this setup, which the Ford Racing unit did not have, but if you want to package an intercooler in there, what you have to have is kind of a common plenum. And that all but precludes the use of long runners also. And the way that they got around it on this Ford Racing unit, you could see, is they packaged the blower in the valley. On the 462 valve, you have a valley there that's not attached to anything else. They just run one of the water pump lines through there. But basically, the block's all sealed up in there. So you can stick things in there, and usually intake manifolding is the thing that goes down there. But they put the blower underneath, and then the blower blows up into the common plenum and then over into the runners. And you can have some runner length like that. Not anywhere near what you can have on a, like on a PI intake manifold, but definitely longer than you would have like on the Kenny Bell deal, where we have short runners. In fact, I was just talking to Mark Sanchez before I got on to see if they had if Kenny Bell still had any of their 462 valves that I might be able to use to adapt an M90 to. So, but the question for tonight is, let's see, this will be our poll. So we're going to do this. Okay, would you rather see the Super RICHIE M90 blower, 6-liter, 2-valve, run with a long? Okay, would you rather see the Super RICHIE M90 blower 462 valve run with a long runner PI intake manifold? So our choices are, I can make an adapter deal to go on the factory PI intake manifold, or we can use some sort of short runner deal like they use with a Kenny Bell. If I can get a hold of a Kenny Bell lower manifold, which Mark and those guys might have, then I can make an adapter plate and put the M90 on it and run that on a 462 valve. It'll be a short runner deal, so it'll make presumably more power at the top, but give up power down low. If I run it on the PI thing, we're just adding boost to what's already there. So we'll get everything that the naturally aspirated PI intake manifold 462 valve does, plus boost. So you guys let me know, would you rather see the long runner intake manifold? The other thing I'm thinking about is if somebody were to do this and make it available to somebody like Tom DeMuse or one of these guys, that you would be doing it with something that's already readily available. Everybody has a PI intake manifold because that's what the motor comes with. So if you're just adapting to that, then maybe you could make it work. Mark even has a Crown Vic that we might be able to do it in the car in, which would be cool. But the downside is that doing it that way, it's not going to fit in any kind of like normal hood clearance. So, there are issues both ways. So it's definitely something to think about. The thing that I like is when we ran that Ford Racing blower, I like the fact that it was an all integrated package. that what they did was take this intake manifold and machine it to accept the rotor pack. No, I can't remember now. I thought that this was an M90 deal, but it might have been a 112. It might have been that big. We never made more than about 500 horsepower, I think, with one of these deals. And that was after we put, let me see here. I think that was after we put cams and we did pulleys and stuff. And actually, it might not have even have been 500. Scrolling. So where's our SHM stuff? This might be get us here. I don't know if we're even out there. Cooks, blower, blow through, pulleys, cams. Yeah, actually nowhere near that. So 430 horsepower. So we weren't making a ton of power at any rate. But we didn't have a whole bunch of motor to work with anyways. So, but we know that the blowers will support more than that, because even if it's an M90, we've made way more than that on a dedicated motor. My question will be is if I run this on something, it'll more than likely be a stock 462 valve. And so we'll see what it does. So if we're talking about a 260 horsepower motor, we can take a stock M90 and it will add power to that. We know that because we haven't done that on the 3.8 liter. That's not going to be a problem. So the question is, you know, if we look at a PI intake manifold, it actually has a really good power curve up to and including 6,000 RPM, which is as much as we'd ever run this thing with the stock camshafts, because it's just not making any, you know, it's not making any kind of power above that level. You know, if we put cams in it, we can do all that stuff later on too. But I just would kind of want to see, you know, guys would want to see, hey, look, we put this V6 blower on a 462 valve, and then can you get it to work? And I'm pretty sure you can. If we can just get the boost going into the PI manifold, I think we're all set. So it's just a matter, I think, of doing for the PI intake manifold. It's just a matter of doing a box and mounting the blower. You know, not a really big box, but mounting the blower on top of there. But like I said, the problem is that this is going to stick up fairly high if we're not putting the blower down in the valley like they did on that kit that I have up on the thumbnail, or we're offset mounting it or doing something else. You know, most of these blower kits are going to package in where we can get the necessary hood clearance. That's the nice thing about the Kenny Bell deal is the manifold, and they also can incorporate an intercooler, which is nice, an air to water intercooler, but they package all that down in the V in between the cylinder heads, try to make it so in their kit, the Kenny Bell kit with the Kenny Bell twin screw, which obviously is going to be way superior to that M90 blower, or even an M112 if we decided to use the intercooler from the 03 Cobra setup. The nice thing about the Kenny Bell is it has an air to water intercooler, and it has a Kenny Bell. And so, but those are not cheap, and I don't know if they still make those. I think that they do, but it's not an inexpensive date to put something like that on. And I don't know if somebody wants to spend, you know, $5,000 or $6,000 on a blower kit for a car that might not be worth $5,000 or $6,000 anymore. I don't even know what a 4.6 Mustang sells for anymore. But it, you know, in looking at all of this stuff, I just kind of wanted to see if it was possible and see which direction that we would want to go to. The nice thing about having the runner length is it, like I said, it's going to add torque everywhere, because we know that when we go to these short runner things that you lose power compared to the long runner deal in most of the curve. Now, obviously, if you compare taking that manifold off and putting the manifold on that also has a positive displacement supercharger like the Kenny Bell or like the M90 or an M112, then, you know, you get a net increase in power, and you get a net increase in power everywhere. There's nowhere that the blower application doesn't make more torque than the naturally aspirated application. It's just that you've taken a step down and then taking a bigger step up. But if you can stay there and then take that big step up, it's just even more. And quite honestly, if you're doing something with stock cams where you're kind of limited in engine speed anyway, you can get more average power production in the range that all of that stuff is working. The flip side to that is if you put a short runner manifold on it and you have lots of extra torque down low from a positive displacement blower, and then you have a short runner manifold, you can actually extend the usable RPM because of the runner length. So a shorter runner is going to want to rev out higher than the long runner does. It's going to want to make peak power at a higher engine speed. You have a blower that will continue to flow because depending on what boost level you're running it at, especially on a stock one, you have way more blower than you have motor there. Only after you put ported heads or cams or those kinds of things on it, where you would start to see, and even on their smallest blower that they have, I was looking at the website, and a lot of their kits came with 2.1 liter blowers for the Kenny Bell stuff, and then you had 2.6s and 2.8s and even bigger to go beyond that if you wanted to make 1,000 horsepower 462 valves. You certainly have enough supercharger to do that, at least on the Kenny Bell side. But just for your normal kind of M90 deal, if we could add 100 horsepower to that and 100 foot-pounds of torque, that'd be a good deal. And then if we could do it without losing 30 or 40 foot-pounds from the intake manifold change, that might also be beneficial. So we'll see what you guys got going on. Long or short runners? Yep, that's me. It's too early. Kyle, what's going on? Jet Black Camaro LT1. Hurricane just passed through and I still have no power. Where are you at that you had a hurricane? Is it Florida? By the way, thanks for the answers about the compound. Lancer Evo. I don't know if I gave you any information, but Queensland's in the house. All right. We like it. Richie, when you're coming to Oz, get some of our danger noodles. You guys have a bunch of them there. I think 8 or 9 of the top 10 most dangerous or most venomous snakes. Got friends in Florida, Texas. Hey, now you're an all-star. I'm in Southwest Louisiana. Chris, what's going on? Have you seen 2-stroke car motors with superchargers? Merlin airplane motors come to mind. A Merlin's not a 2-stroke though, right? I have seen 2-stroke supercharged and turbocharged diesel engines in trucks. What can I steal a diverter valve off of to allow the turbo to take over when the supercharger is no longer making more boost and the turbo is blowing into? Take a look at the Lancia Delta rally car. They did that with a supercharger and a turbo. And you can do that. You can blow past or around the blower. You might be able to do that with a big enough blow-off valve. Alan, what's going on? Do you think a sleeve valve engine would be fun? I don't know anything about them. I've never done anything with them. Kyle, you have the 4.6 book. It was an M90. It says M90 in there, but only because I said that it was an M90. I'm not 100% convinced of that anymore. And looking at the blower, it sure looks more like a 112, but I can't swear to it either way right now. Everyone here seems to always be looking for a way to squeeze every little bit of horsepower as possible. Yeah. I think my channel doesn't really cater to that so much as I call it the 95% rule. So we're looking for like the low hanging fruit. We're looking for the thing that makes big differences. And then a lot of times we talk about little things like rod ratio and offsetting flipping the pistons and offsetting the rod and stuff like that, where, it's just interesting to talk about. Setup has a box valve with a second air filter between the blower and the turbo, which opens when the blower is no longer making boost. You could also you could clutch the blower too, so it's not spinning. Danny, what's going on? In your, let's see, in your 4.6 book, the short runner manifolds kill the average. They do. And if you look at my focus book, you'll see a very good test where we illustrated exactly that. I did that test on the Vortec on the Vortec 4 valve, we did that also. So we ran the 01 Cobra intake manifold, the long runner deal, and then with a Vortec, and then I replaced that with the Vortec that they used. They made a dedicated thing that bolts right onto the lower manifold and intercooler from an 03 Cobra. So it also had an intercooler on it, but it had no runner length. It was just a common plenum attached to the discharge from the blower, and it lost a lot of power. And then on the focus book that I did test seek with Oscar Jackson, and he had a little M45, and then we also put an M62 on there. But on his blower kits, he had a positive displacement blower with a manifold with very short or no runners, just a kind of a big common plenum. That's kind of what they had to do. Again, it's always a packaging thing. So we've got to get the packaging, especially if the blower and everything is back near the firewall. And so you have a limited amount of room. So when that's back there, you know, he says, "Oh no, you want to get the boost like immediately to the valve, and you don't want runner length." I'm like, "No, you do want runner length." I said, "And I'll show you what happens." And so what I did was I ran the factory long runner focus manifold. We ran that NA, and then I ran his manifold by making an adapter to put the stock throttle body on there and the elbow and stuff that we had on there, the air intake and stuff, and we ran that NA, and then we put the blower on it with the short manifold and ran that. I said, "So here's all the things." I said, "But just the thing you need to look at is look at what's happening when we're not in boost. So here's what the manifold is doing, and then when we add boost to that, it does exactly the same thing. So we've lost a bunch of torque up to, it didn't lose it all the way up. The short runner actually made more peak power than the long runner focus manifold did, but lost a ton of low speed power, low speed and mid range up to, I'd have to look at my focus book, up to maybe 5,000 or something." Let's see if I have that. Let's see, Ford Focus. Here we go. Wah! SVT in the house. SVT. Test number 1. Boost reference line, SVT, big boost upgrade. Yeah, because when you look at the stock motor, it went from 109 wheel horsepower to 147, but it was really, even with the blower on there, it really was only better than the stock stuff. You only noticed a big power gain. 55, 6, 65, 7, 75, 8. That RPM can't be right because there's no way we took our thing to 8,000 RPM. So yeah, I would say above, it only had significant gains past like 5,000 RPM. So the runner length hurt it a lot. And then the blower helped, but the blower was having a hard time just overcoming the loss from the intake manifold. Does the blower air heat up much with the factory tight 180 degree to get longer runners? The runner length doesn't really change the air temperature. The temperature is going to change from pressure from the blower. Tell me about if I'm one of them trying to compound a fully built Lancer Evo. Yeah. Louisiana. Well, hopefully you guys are all safe. I'll let you drive my 74 XB Falcon Coupe. Sounds awesome. I would love to come to Australia. If the long runner manifold stop making power at a certain RPM, then you have to extrude hone it to a larger internal diameter. Will manifold make more power at a higher RPM? I don't think so. I mean, maybe you could get it bigger. I think you'd have to change it more than extrude honing would do it. I can tell you that when we ran the tune port manifold stuff and we did a ported version of it and even a big tube version of it, it didn't change really where the motor made peak power. It just made more everywhere because it needed more flow. Time to get the steel ruler out. Detroit factory engineers did street racing and got ideas from regular people. The stream's lagging right now. Does runner length affect velocity? Yeah, it will affect inertial ram as well as the reflected wave that we're talking about. He did dyno test swing with a 3-liter Kenny Bell on a diesel blowing into an S300. Once the turbo took over, the blower cost 5 horsepower to blow at atmospheric pressure. 2,000 to 4,000 RPM increase. And following Alan Milliard, guy who built the Viper engine motorcycle. He also made some 4- and 5-cylinder Kawasaki 2-strokes with factory parts. Cool. Bigger is gooder. Haven't found a suitable part yet. Diesel pump. Diesel pump UK's latest video on his 50s GMC. It's super cool. It makes 600 horsepower. That's very cool. I missed my SVT Focus. I know, having been a Z-Tech Focus owner, obviously we drooled over the cool SVT stuff. Remember the Vortec intake that blew into 0304 Cobra intercooler and lower? I think they said they discontinued after you compared it. It was a huge loser. It was back for a Muscle Mustangs and Fast Forward article way back. I'm from Puerto Rico. Racing's part of our life. Yeah, they do it big down there. Long runner flows more. A long runner might flow less than a short runner if you just do an airflow test on them, but it's not making more power through most of the RPM range because of the flow rate of the runner. It's making more power from these other things that we're talking about, from the supercharging effect, from inertial ram, and from a reflected wave. No herping in Australia. It's a whole different level of risk. My problem going there would not be the snakes that I would encounter, because I've got no problem with that, whether they're venomous or not. I catch venomous snakes all the time. In fact, when I go catch snakes, I catch way more venomous snakes than I catch non-venomous snakes, because they're all rattlesnakes around here. Not all of them, 70% or 75%. My problem, and something I'd have to do before I went someplace, is I have to learn what those snakes look like so that I know which ones are. I would, going to Australia, I just would assume all of them could kill me. So I would treat them accordingly. Long runners till you hit 7,500 to 12,000. Yeah. What ball holder is recommended for plasma molly rings? Yeah, you should talk to the ring manufacturer about that. You rarely see snakes in Puerto Rico, unless you go to the rainforest. I don't know that I've ever looked up that. I have looked up lots of stuff in Australia, because they got a lot of cool stuff there. Got goannas, lots of white sharks there. We got a lot of those in California too, off the coast of California. You guys got big crocodiles, salties, big spiders too. Here you talk about ring gap on a turbo LS engine. Does it also apply on an LS with a Vortec supercharger? Yeah, any time you're boosting it, or even nitrous, you need more ring gap, because you're putting more heat in the ring. Would long runners versus short runners affect NA power? Yeah, they affect power on anything. They affect the NA power output. They affect boosted power output. They affect all of it. They just affect power output. The longer the runner, the lower the RPM were, and it's not 1 RPM, it's an effective range, because there's a range of RPM where the reflected wave is still adding cylinder filling. There's probably one point that you could calculate where it's adding the most, maybe. It's a pretty dynamic equation, but it's also based on cam timing when that wave is starting, and then when inertial ram is most effective. But it happens over a fairly broad range. So if we say, hey, look, it's a long runner manifold, we run a PI intake manifold or a truck manifold for an LS, those things still can make power out to 6,000 or 6,500 if you put the right camshaft in them. A lot of iguanas in Puerto Rico. Oh, I would imagine, yeah, they have. That's a Florida issue too that they have. Got a blue tongue lizard in my backyard. Nice. I like those. Those are cool. Funny thing with the snakes here in Oz is generally it's aggressive. If it's aggressive, it's lethal. Calm snakes are the non-venomous ones. We don't. I have never run across a snake that I would characterize as aggressive. Like I've never had a snake knock on my door and say, "Hey, look, it's you and me. We're throwing hands right now, or tails, or whatever." I've seen snakes be defensive, like if you are trying to capture them, or if you've, normally if you come across a snake, because I'm big and they're small, no matter how big they are, unless it was an anaconda or something. But really, what? You're not doing anything. You need to just go lay down. Go lay down, huh? Arr, 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 arr. Come here, get up here. Go get your brother. Go get him. I've not run across them that are want to chase you or anything. I've found some that will strike at you and stuff if you've cornered them and not given them a way out. But the vast majority of them, 95% of them or more, want to just get away because they don't want to be eaten, and lots of stuff eats snakes. Molly rings, it's preferred to plateau hone lived in Bayamon. I've not heard of that. Bayamon? Okay. I don't know where that is, but sounds cool. What happened to the M90 on my Silverado? It didn't stay on there because we couldn't get the motor working correctly because and still does. I haven't even fixed it. It needs O2 or not O2 sensors. It needs knock sensors. Right now, it's constantly pulling how much ever timing it pulls when they're bad. When your dog barks. My dog thinks there's a dog near. My dogs do that. Whenever they see stuff on TV too. If there's a dog on TV, they just jump up on the thing where the TV is and they just sit there and watch it and bark at it and try to talk to it and stuff. If the dog runs by or anything, and even some other animals also too. They want to chase them. They love watching David Attenborough. It's something about his voice I think is soothing to them. They love watching that. So they'll sit on the end of the bed or on the couch and they'll watch, like if we're watching, I don't know, Animal Planet or whatever we're watching with David. He's amazing. You can't say enough good things about him. And also they like Spanish soccer for some reason. They'll sit and watch. I think they're waiting for the guy to yell goal. But Tim, what's going on? And Tim, yes, today was pizza day. I did have pizza. And it was Little Caesars. Would you rather see the Super RICHIE M90 blower 462 valve with a long runner intake? Most of the people are saying yes. We want the long runner and the boost. Old dual runner GSR 1.8 liter. Yep. Yeah, the dual runner manifold was good. It had two power curves. It didn't ever make as much power on the short runner version as a Type R does, but it did have the dual runner thing, which was cool. I have an aunt and cousin that lives in Puerto Rico. You're too white bread. On any of the K series, did they do dual runner intake manifolds on any of the K series stuff? I don't think that they did. I always thought that they should, because then they could have VTEC, and I want VTEC on both the intake and exhaust cams, and I want VVT on both of them too. So you can have all sorts of variable things going on there. That's when the engineers, the tuning guys, have to earn their money. For a 2-valve, I think long runners is the only option. 7,000 RPM and up isn't touched with normal driving. No, but if you look at what a Kenny Bell does, a Kenny Bell kit does on a stock motor, I they weren't anywhere near that kind of RPM. I think that they oh yeah, that's funny. I was looking at some of the data that they had. Jim was always very good about having a bunch of dyno data. He was the dyno data king. Yeah, they're only showing revving it out to 6,000 with the stock cams on it. It may have continued past that, but not and it only makes peak power at less than 5,000 on the stock one, at least the way that they're showing it. 6 pounds, 9 pounds, and 14 pounds. Nice. Your dog gets scared when you watch soccer? What was a Cosworth Vega? It was a 4-valve motor. I'm not going to run them, so you're welcome to them. Just need to know where to send them. Danny, what are you sending? My dog's like Spanish weather girls. They have a good taste. Don't everybody Bronco? 6,000 RPM and under, long runners. Yeah. Flowers look and smell amazing. That's good. You know, it's a season. Did you ever test old school superchargers, 671s and 871s like Dyer's with super modified Offenhauser 360 single plane with an adapter? I've never seen that. I mean, I've seen it in pictures, but I don't remember them doing that ever at Westech. I've seen the plates that you mount on like a single plane, or you could do it on a dual plane too. But I've never seen it. I mean, the cool one that comes to mind is when they ran that the normal blower manifold, and then they put the tunnel ram on there, and the tunnel ram obviously was a lot better. Long runner to try and force as much air as possible with low RPM. Without spending a fortune on 462V heads and valve train, focusing on average horsepower and torque below 6,500, says stock PI intake manifold. I agree. It works really well. I made a custom Super RICHIE adjustable manifold, the dual runner deal, to try to make more power than the PI stock PI manifold. It took a little while. So I'm guessing the reason people vote for long runners is to maximize low RPM torque. It's not just low RPM torque. It's torque all the way up to wherever the crossover point is for a short runner manifold. My guess is that crossover point might be as high as 6,000 RPM. So the long, and we're using long and short as a relative thing, but whatever the runner length measurement is on a PI manifold, whatever that is versus the 2 inches or whatever that it is, like on the Kennyville short runner manifold, you're just not getting any sort of reflective wave RPM range or really any inertial ram happening either, because it's just not timed correctly for that runner length. So if you can get boost and the long runner, you know, up to 6,000 or whatever, it's going to be a better combination. Definitely need a 471. The 10-inch rotors are a lot easier to spin than the 671s. For what? For a small application? Old Offie 360 is weird. Short runners actually curved the vanes. Used my 76 Pontiac 454, still make excellent off torque and allowed high RPM to 7,200. Limited airflow. Yeah, there's no manifold that has the there's no manifold that's a short runner manifold that also has low RPM power like a dual plane does, and then the top end of a single plane. That's just not in the cards. Honestly, I haven't seen 2-barrel versus. Oh, I've seen 2-barrel versus 4-barrel, but I want to see 2V versus 2 versus 4 versus dual quad versus 6-pack. A lot of that is going to come down to what the manifold that you're using for that. Getting the torque benefits to carry over even to 5,000 would be great. I would think that up to 6,000 that the PI manifold would probably be better than how short the Kenny Bell one is, I think. Got to try both short and long runner with an M90. Now we did that a little bit on the LS motor where we ran the high ram and the low ram. And it makes a lot more average power with the high ram. When I tested it, it made 15 horsepower and the same torque than the factory iron one. I'd watch a comparison on both long versus short. Worked on a friend's early new Edge Celine with the 4.6, the 2-valve M90. I remember running comparisons. In fact, we ran a Kenny Bell versus one of those, and that's the one where the guys, not so much the Celine guys, although they were there, but the guys from Magnuson, that's where they were. The Magnuson and Eaton, that's where they tried to get me fired because I said something that they didn't like. I said that the larger Kenny Bell twin screw made more power than the M90 did, and more than the 112 on, because we also tested back then we were doing lightning stuff, and we also tested on the lightning. And I said, look, this is a twin screw blower. That's a Roots blower. I said, there's no comparison between the efficiency of these two blowers. And even if there was, let's say you want to make an argument about adiabatic efficiency or isentropic efficiency or whatever the thing is that you're wanting to argue about, this blower is bigger. It will make more power. There's no way that you or anybody else could come to the dyno and show me how this blower makes more power than this blower. It's not going to happen. They were very adamant about that being the case. I've seen telescopic and variable intake runner length on the Le Mans rotary deal. Yeah. Yeah, if you can make an adjustable runner, that works really good. And there are some that have, the other way that they do it is they basically split, like the GSR is like that too, where they kind of open a valve up. Ford Racing I had one of those FR500 intake manifolds where they do that too. They just have a butterfly that opens so that it can now breathe through the short version. Sometimes, like with Porsche, they had a stack with a separator in the middle of them, and then they would just basically separate the stack, and then it would breathe off the shorter version. So there are a number of ways to do it. A telescopic one is kind of cool because if you did it and it wasn't just all long or all short, you could do variations in between there. And they used to do that in Formula One, and I thought that they outlawed it. And then somebody told me, I thought that maybe you can do that again. I don't know. Does speed density in a Fox body hold you back over MAF when going to a mild heads cam and intake? I don't have any comment on on getting past smog. I don't get involved in any of that. What I can tell you is if you're trying to run these modifications with a factory speed density computer, it's harder unless you can go in and tune the computer. If I recall, Reichardt Racing made a single plane 2-valve intake manifold. I don't know if I would call it a single plane like a carbureted deal, but they did a short runner one, and that's in my. I tested that a few times, more than a few times, and that's in that book that I did on 4.6 2-valve and 4-valve stuff. And again, for a guy running lots of RPM, that might be a way to go. And I think I talked about it in the book that I think that some of the design for that manifold was, this is what we can make. This is producible, and that's part of the deal. If you can't make it, then you can want all of these things to happen. And if you're just welding something together, that's a much easier design. But we had the P51 stuff, and there were a few manifolds that were available back then. I always wonder why Dyer and others use Offenhauser intake base on supercharged ones. I don't know. I don't know I haven't looked into that enough to know which manifolds people used more than others if they were doing some sort of an adapter plate. High Ram versus Trailblazer SS. Which one is better for low RPM power? The Trailblazer SS. It has a much longer intake manifold. I mean, a much longer intake runner. I have those videos are up. You can see what the different intakes do. Richard, off subject, not a problem. Just got an email from AFR, and they'll be releasing new small block Mopar heads. So that it would be a game changer. They know what they're doing, so it'd be cool if they have that. The runner length on the tune port is 8 inches. It's a lot longer than that. I had a Sonic Ram Chrysler 29 inches. It's a very big difference in runner length for low RPM. Yeah, it depends on where you want the effective runner length to be. We ran one of those Sonic Rams at West Tech. They ran it on a bigger than stock motor. It was almost 500 inches, I think. And I think that they kept lowering the start RPM down. I think that they got down to 2,000 RPM or so, where the thing was making peak torque. How do the eBay sheet metal intakes run and what RPM range? Dan, you can take a look. I got videos up on what they do. They lose power compared to any of the factory stuff through most of the curve, and they make more peak power. If I buy a new LS3 crate motor, put a supercharger on it, I have to open it up to put ring gap in it. You don't have to, but if you're trying to run, are you trying to run lots of boost and make lots of power? If you are, then you need to do that. And if you bought an LS3 crate motor, you should be doing that anyway, because you should be more than likely an LS3 crate motor. Even the B15s, the ones that are designed for boost, do not have head studs on them. They don't have enough valve spring in them. They have a very soft camshaft in them. They have a lot of things that you'd want to change anyway. My 98 Cobra has different length runners, didn't work well with my stage 3 cams. Yeah, if you have the factory 98 Cobra intake manifold, those are fairly long runner. And what guys did on those is cut them at various lengths inside that common plenum. Megalodon, dyno testing on telescopic runners. I have lots and lots and lots of runner length tests up to show you what runner length does. I've never built a working telescopic one, although that we've talked about that a lot. BMW S1000 RR raises and lowers the throttle body tubes based on RPM. So those are the runners. In a motorcycle engine, typically they have throttle blades in each one of the runners. And so if it's raising and lowering those, then that's runner length. The Offie Portasonic would make a great blower manifold for your Cleveland. Okay. I don't know what makes a blower manifold a blower manifold. The intake manifold does what the intake manifold does. It does it NA or it does it under boost. It does the same thing. I remember a guy with an 87 Monte Carlo with an LS3 with an eBay sheet metal intake at 6,000 RPM. The top side collapsed in on the chassis dyno, 3 inches. Did it have a backfire or something, or did it collapse under decel? Some of them were fairly thin, and that's why, like, Holly did the race sniper version, which was thicker and had a flange and everything on it. And so a lot of those manifolds, if you look at them, the sniper ones and all of these ones from the China fabricated manifolds, if you watch those, you can see the thing. I mean, it has a frequency. You can hear it. It's vibrating. And there's deformation in those, definitely way more so under a hard decel where you got a lot of vacuum than under boost. I've seen them modified to be a dual plane low rise 2.4 barrel. Will the Trick Flow 351 box intakes ever come back to the market? I don't know. You gotta get on those guys. They will be at SEMA with them. Pricing, okay. I want to say 200 horsepower loss when the top intake plenum collapsed in. Have you ever run a Supercharger 300 inline 6? I have not. I've never run an inline 6-cylinder Ford, if that's the one you're talking about. After your tests of the 4V FR500 dual runner intake, the Lincoln Aviator dual runner looked like a winner, but fell short in testing. Yeah, I tested one of those manifolds, and it doesn't make as much power as an FR500 does. And I don't think that the dual runner Aviator made as much power as an 01 Cobra manifold did. I changed the Lancer Evo stock manifold to an AMS F1. The low end RPM dropped 20 horsepower, but gained 75 on the top. That is a big difference. One of my old books suggests that GM TPI intake was 28 inches plenum to valve. That number makes more sense to me. All right, Eric, we'll see you later. If you run 1.7 rockers on GT40 heads and a stock cam, how much power is that worth? I don't know, 10 or 12 maybe. Sounds like the guy at LS Fest who saw the fast LSX intake flexing. I remember seeing that. I saw videos of it, and it was definitely doing that. I'd never seen that before. You're going to call your alderman about trick flow? Uh-oh. He's telling on him. I like to measure the runner length on the 60s Grand Sport cross rams with the side draft Webers. Those are not going to be terribly long. Those would be like the cross rams that we see now, I think. At the same boost level of 37 PSI. It doesn't surprise me that you get more peak power from going from a stock manifold to an aftermarket manifold. That's a lot of power. And was your motor repeatable? Like, was this on a chassis dyno? That's always the problem for me when I'm not aiming at you. But when people do chassis dyno testing, particularly with very high horsepower turbo stuff, I want to see 5 or 6 runs where it makes exactly the same power on every pull. And then I'm open to making a change. But if they can't do that, then we can't make changes. Because if you can't make the same power every pull, then it's not repeatable. And it's not, there's no testing that can be done there. Eating rice with chopsticks. I'm pretty good at that. Consider the 93 Cobra had those rockers heads, but also an E3 throw cam GT40 intake, and all of that was worth 40 horsepower. A 93 Cobra didn't have an E303 cam in it. It had a stock cam in it. I have questions, and my stepdad and I get in arguments about. What are you guys getting in arguments about? Mega Squirt on my Hemi Dakota does not support the short runner function in the manifold. Do you think an RPM switch could be sufficient to operate it? I think so. I don't know what the activation is for that. Is the Is the actuator just a 5-volt thing, or is it a 12-volt thing? What is it? I'm sure it's just an on-off thing, right? They're just opening and closing it. Are you installing 1.7 rockers or camshafts first in a stock 302? If I was going to try one thing, like what we did in our testing, we put rockers on first because it's an easier install. And then you could take those off, put stock rockers back on, or 1.6s or whatever, and then do a camshaft. The Trailblazer SS versus the higher RAM on a mostly fully built. Will Trailblazer SS still outcompete the high RAM at low RPM and torque? Yes, by a lot. In fact, I'll tell you right now, if we compare those on a 590 horsepower 6-liter, which is a pretty good 6-liter, it's better than most that you'll see out there in the wild, NA ones anyway. I'll tell you exactly what the crossover is. LS intake shootout. Okay. Okay, so the high RAM made more peak power. The Trailblazer SS, and this was a big cam, it was a 6-liter with airflow research heads on it and a good sized cam. It was a forged flat top piston, Carrillo rod, CP piston, 6-liter. It was a 469 comp cam, which is a 231, 247. Airflow research, LSX V2, 230 heads with 58 cc chambers. So it had compression, had 1 7/8 headers, 75-pound injectors. We ran the Trailblazer SS with a fast 92 millimeter throttle body. And it made 563 horsepower. And 597 foot-pounds. The high RAM made 586 horsepower. I thought it was a little more than that. Let me see. Oh, that's because that's a dual quad one. That's the wrong one. I'm looking at the wrong one. Bear with me here. Because I thought that the high RAM was more like 590 or something. Okay, here's the high RAM. Okay, so the high RAM made 596. So it made, yeah, it made more than 30 horsepower more. It was only better past 6,300 RPM. Everywhere below that, the Trailblazer SS was better. And it was better by as much as 54 versus 92. Almost 40 foot-pounds at like 4,600. And it had that kind of torque gain, like even down here at 36 or 3,700, we had 430 versus 65. So 35 foot-pounds down there. So it was a good bit better below 62 or 6,300. And only above that, out past 7,000 really was the high RAM better. So it depends on what you want to do. Grand Sport was run with extended trumpets on the Webers, so the effective runner length was extended. Yeah, if you have stacks on top of the Webers, then that's runner length. Really, Richard, what's the smallest motor you've ever boosted? The 1-liter Sprint motor probably is the smallest automotive engine. No, the Cobra had a factory cam in it. It just had rockers in it. It had rockers and an intake. 10 pulls to a ICV valve got damaged. Regarding Gen 2 LT1s, why do they think they made the intake runner so short? I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking unless they just wanted, unless people were complaining about these things not revving or not pulling. But it is a better combination. I mean, it's 50 horsepower better than the L98 stuff, but It doesn't have the really low speed power that the L98 does. I think they're willing to trade that to give that motor, you know, more usable RPM range. Transport manifold is run. Yep. I bet the Edelbrock LS cross ram is of similar length to the Grand Sport. I need to go back and look at let me go look at a Grand Sport one. What year was the Grand Sport? 60 what? 65, 66, something like that. Oh yeah, that is longer than I thought. Oh, that's a Grand Sport Tribute. That's not the same thing. No, I don't want to do that. Come on, somebody show me a picture of the engine. I'm very, very disappointed. For some reason, I was thinking that they didn't stick out past the valve covers. But it's been a while since I've seen any of them. Let's see. LS All Things, the Gen 2 LT1 reverse cooling small block Chevy intake actually was copied off of a Reeves Callaway design for ultra rare mailbox intake on B2K twin turbo C4 Corvettes. I bet the Edelbrock LS cross ram is of similar length. Did you ever turbocharge the Gen 5 L83? Nope. Let's see. Scrolling. What's the most wow that didn't break it? I'm sure it's the first Big Bang 4.8 that we did. We kept trying to just turn the boost up and it just didn't want to break. Looking for low RPM power and torque, so the Trailblazer SS wins. Yeah. Even the stock truck intake is very good down low. Yeah, they both are. Does the fact that long intake runners equal more torque apply to direct injection the same way it affects tune port injection? Runner length, the reflected wave is going to work whether it's direct injected or not. That the runner length has nothing to do with the injection. What springs do you recommend for a low buck truck cam? The guys from BTR have $79 springs for that. Any 550 lift spring will work. The factory LS3, LY6, LS6 springs, all of those will work too. Might remind folks of your 4.8 cool parts versus mild parts down a comparison. The intake, the truck intake cam, small cam, the turbo. Yeah, it lit sooner. Although I made, Kyle on that, I made a number of changes though. I used the wrong cam, used the wrong intake, used a bigger turbo, all of the things that would make it, like not the right combination. What's a good spot for wide? Is that a wide band? Is that what you're talking about? L302 shorty, BBK shorty to X pipe. You're not going to put it in the header, so that because it probably doesn't have a provision for that. So anywhere in the X pipe it works. I think RPM is what kills the motor for long runners and low end power. With the blower, the engine doesn't need to rev high to make power, unless it's a centrifugal, or even some of the Roots blowers with short runners. They or the twin screws, they can rev up pretty high with the short runner stuff. I'd like to find one of the Super M LT1 intake manifolds with big plenums on them. Yeah, and compared to the LT1 intake manifold, the Super Ram has longer runners. He got mad, like I understand, if he was pushing 7,600, but I'm only at 6,300. If you're at 6,300, you need to have the Trailblazer SS intake manifold, or even the factory truck intake manifold. So you guys are getting all the commercials? And in the 063 was that for the Grand Sport stuff? Okay. I got premium last month and it was worth it. That's good. I have, but still, man, it has had 1,500 horsepower small blocks. So he was running like very high boost small blocks in. They're right there at the valve cover on the original Grand Sport. Don't think they go over. I'm doing another LS, an LC9. Would a 408 stroker kit be good? An LC9 is a 5.3, so you're not going to get to 408 inches. You could get to a 383 on that. Supposedly the mailbox Reeves Callaway intake short runner was worth 100 horsepower more than the B2K twin turbo C4. That wouldn't surprise me at the RPM that they were running the Sledgehammer deal at. That wouldn't surprise me at all, because the factory tune port stuff, which is what they ran on the street cars, is as we know, is a very, very low RPM motor. I mean, I think mine made peak power at 5,000 or something. They don't want to be doing that. Milo, I'm up here. It's okay. Todd, you're going to do some driving, man. Does tune port or direct port make more power under boost, assuming both are closely built as can be? I think direct port is going to make more power. I was under the assumption that tune port would, because it has charge cooling, but the direct injection seems to make more power. At least the information that I got from Brian Tooley when they were doing testing on port injection versus direct injection, they were doing it on arguably on a piston design and a chamber design that was designed for direct injection. I don't know if that makes any difference, but the thing that you're gaining from and this was Brian's discussion, was that the thing that you're gaining is that you're not flowing any fuel, so you're not displacing any airflow. So as you go up in power, where you start needing more airflow from your cylinder head, you can get more airflow from your cylinder head by not having fuel also being flown through it. Is there an intake with longer runners than the truck? No. Well, the cross ram that Edelbrock did, or the cross ram that Holley does, the dual runner, dual throttle body thing, will make more low speed power than the truck manifold. It's the only one that I've seen that will do that, other than the custom one that I did with really long runners in it. Can you bore a 351 to 460? You can make a 460 small block Ford out of an aftermarket block. I don't think you could do that with a stock block. This was 13 to 1 and they ran out of alcohol. So was it a big twin turbo thing or something like that? Because he's not going to make 1500 horsepower NA. Looking to make more torque on a 5.3 LS in 2006. Do they make a long runner intake? That, yeah, we did that. So 383 would be good for my LC9 build. If you want to do an NA one and you want to make power and extra torque and stuff, the bigger motor will definitely do that. I have lots of 383 videos up on the channel. And they had like a 400 shot. Okay. So you're saying that they changed the intake manifold on the production motors? And not the Sledgehammer? I question people who shut off a dyno pull when it's still headed vertical. Either make the valve transferable for more RPM or reconfigure their combination to make our average below your scary RPM. So you don't care about other people's motors. It's okay. They should rev them regardless. My dog's barking at your dog, and that's Milo too. I don't know why he's barking. Sometimes his eyesight is not good because he's, I don't know, 14 or 15 now. And so if we leave the room, he barks. He wants to know where we are because he can't see us very well. And now it's dark down there. Is the cost worth the games? BTR Stage 3 truck cam plus CNC ported heads. What's good valve springs? I think your similar combo and pump gas made around 400. Well, what are you trying to do with that? I don't know that I don't know what application I'd ever recommend a Stage 3 truck cam for. Have you ever run 550 oil in a supercharger application? You mean in the supercharger or in the motor? I'm sure you tried, but you remember the compression gain from the flat tops in the 5.3 with the 706 head. You can calculate it. Just go to Wallace Racing and plug in. I don't know what the dish is on a 5.3. I don't know how many cc's it is. I would guess 8 or 10 or something. My last Spidey senses. What he hears is my wife who just got home. Sledgehammer was a cast intake tube, but two-piece design, removable, kind of like the XL Super Ram, but different. So yeah, I remember seeing the photos of it. Because I remember having a discussion with somebody that was convinced that it was the factory tune port manifold. I'm like, it's not a factory tune port manifold. They couldn't have done that with that. I couldn't say they couldn't have. It made life a lot harder because they'd had to do it at 5,000 RPM or something. And we're going to close out our poll at 81% saying, yes, give me all that long runner stuff. Because you should have all the torque, right? Well, it's not just torque. It's not just low speed torque. It's more average power, including probably at the peak, maybe. You don't know where the crossover point is. Because sometimes with the short runner stuff, the actual crossover between the long runner and the short runner can happen after the power peak. Which it did. I think I'll have to go back and look. I can't remember on the Focus. I thought there were a couple of applications where they crossed over and one continued out farther, but it was already after they had made peak power. So there's really no choice there. And on that note, it is time to go. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.